So we are doing this. This is the first episode of Life Psych podcast, Baby Bump Edition. Very exciting. Very exciting.
It is. It is exciting. It's exciting to have been planning to do this for months and to finally be launching.
Yeah, I'm excited for that too. It feels like it's come to a natural time frame where we're ready to do it and we're just going to do it. So
we're doing it.
Yeah. Here we are. So episode 1 is essentially our intro so that people know who we are. And, you know, as they start listening, they might want to know what our background is and why we're interested in talking about pregnancy and mental health in general. So I think it's important to give listeners some context of what our relationship is to those topics.
Totally. Do you want to go first or should I go first?
I could go first. That's fine. So I'm Maria Clemente. I am an LPC, which stands for Licensed Professional Counselor. I'm trauma trained. So what that means is the lens that I look through therapy at when I'm working with clients is always through a lens of what has happened in their lives that might be causing some of the struggles that they're going through right now. One of the other lenses I look through when I'm doing therapy is mindfulness-based psychotherapy. I find that really helpful when I'm working with my clients. And the specialization areas that I've kind of been drawn to when it comes to populations have been teenagers. I love working with teens, and more pertinent to this podcast is the perinatal population. I am a PMHC, which means perinatal mental health certified, which means I took, some education and did some training specific to this population of people to be able to help them through those kind of more specific struggles.
I'm really excited to go through this podcasting process and hear things from you that you've learned from that training, because I have no professional background in learning about, well, that's not true, none, but not anywhere near what you've gone through as far as professional training around working with pregnancy, understanding pregnancy, pre, during, and post. Should I jump in here? You want to say some more stuff?
Absolutely. Let's talk a little bit about your background.
Cool. So I'm an LMFT, which stands for Licensed Marriage and Family Therapist in the state of Massachusetts. And I specialize in sex and sexuality. So when I say that I don't have as much knowledge as Maria, but my training in pregnancy involved probably 3 to 5 CE hours in studying pregnancy, and particularly the relationship between pregnancy and sex. So pregnancy as it impacts, a couple's sexual relationship, and a little bit about what's going on in the body, but not a lot of medical stuff. And I'm really excited. Maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, but I'm excited, hopefully, in this podcasting journey to learn more about some of the biological and medical pieces that I don't know. I primarily work with individuals, and I've got a lot of sun coming in. Let's fix that. I primarily work with individual adults and adult couples. And other than talking with couples about sort of, I don't want to say generic because everyone's experience is unique, but couples therapy problems, I work a lot with desire issues. With couples and even with individuals. I find that a lot of people come in individually because they want to talk about their own relationship to desire, to their own body, to sexuality. So I don't know a lot about pregnancy specifically, other than what I have experienced my friends and family members going through, and the little bit of training I've gotten, and some of the family life cycle perspectives on adding a family member to a couple system.
Which is a huge topic, by the way. And so is, I think, what's going to be interesting for me, as you were saying, it'll be interesting for you to learn a little bit more about the biological mechanisms and the mental health aspects of pregnancy related topics. For me, I think it'll be interesting to understand the perspective of sex therapy and relationship to our bodies, especially for women after they give birth and as their body's changing, and really that whole process, because who we are is largely associated with our bodies, right? What we believe about ourselves is largely associated with our bodies. So as that changes, what does that mean about what we believe about ourselves? So I think that there's a lot of mental health connection to sex therapy and family therapy as your dynamics change with your family, which is, I suppose I'm jumping ahead of myself, but that's why I think I called you when it came to who do I want to do this with.
Yeah, tell us, Maria, tell us about, this was one of the things on our outline, the origin and the inspiration for why we're doing this, and because it was your idea. So how did you come to this idea?
So if we're talking about what the origin was for this podcast, it kind of started a long time ago. I was with one of my cousins, hanging out with her. She had just given birth, and we were talking about nutrition. And she was saying how she had followed this podcaster who is a nutritionist or some sort of nutrition expert. And this particular podcaster followed her own pregnancy through a lens of nutrition. And I thought, wow, that's really cool, right? Taking a specific knowledge base and kind of filtering an acute period of life through that lens, and kind of finding ways to connect the two pieces of information, that being nutrition and pregnancy. So then time went on, and I had been seeing more and more perinatal clients throughout my practice. And the more I saw of this population, the more I kind of uncovered a need. And the need that I found was that they need support, right? A lot of times women feel really alone throughout this period of time because it's so much change in such a short period of time that it feels really scary. And sometimes could feel like they're the only one going through it, even though they know cognitively and logically there's tons of other women who are out there who are pregnant. So finding a way to support these women that was a little bit more down to earth and a little bit more, let's just bring it back down. What I was finding with these women is they were looking at pregnancy and the experience that they were having and thinking of it as completely wrong. Like they were like, I shouldn't be feeling this way. I shouldn't have all these emotions. I shouldn't be, unable to control what I'm feeling inside. And everything that I learned about pregnancy related to mental health was, this is all very normal, right? So I was like, this is such an easy way, if I can get out information to a large group of people, to be like, yes, this is normal. What you're feeling is normal. What you're experiencing is widely experienced by so many people out there. I think that in and of itself might give women space to just feel a little bit more grounded in the experience. So through that combined with thinking about how this podcaster looked at pregnancy through a lens of nutrition, it's like, that would be really cool to look at pregnancy through a lens of mental health, right? And find a way to meet the need of supporting the emotional and mental health challenges that these women were going through. And I didn't originally think of myself as being the, subject in this endeavor, because I'm not one to usually put out a lot about my personal life on social media. I'm the therapist. I'm usually the one listening versus giving the information about self. But a couple people in my life suggested that, or encouraged that, it might be a fun kind of way to follow my own journey of pre-pregnancy, pregnancy, and eventually motherhood. So that's really where the origin of this podcast came from.
I love it. And so, Maria, when you approached me with this idea, my first thought, honestly, my gut reaction was, I am not really qualified to talk about pregnancy in any kind of educational way. I don't feel like I know enough. And then the more you kind of pitched the idea to me, the more I realized this is really like a learning journey that I think we'll go on together. And the thing that got me really excited on a personal and I think selfish note is like being able to be on this journey with you, and through the experience of creating this podcast and doing both the episodes and the meetings where we're planning our episodes and stuff like that. Like, I knew that I would have the opportunity to really spend a lot of time talking with you about your journey. And I thought that would be really special for us. And for anyone listening, Maria is married to my cousin who I grew up with. Like, we're 3 months apart in age. So it's really special to have this relationship. And so I'm really excited. And I'm really excited to bring I think my own professional lens to the conversation. I hope I'll have some interesting things to add as we go forward.
You definitely will. You have a wide breadth of information that I think a lot of people could benefit from.
Yeah, I hope so. Well, and that leads to, I think, our another thing we were hoping to talk about in this first episode, which is like, what do we want people to gain from this experience? Like, Maria, you already talked about this a little bit, I think, when you were speaking about how you came up with the idea to do this in the first place. For me, I am not pregnant. I have not been pregnant before. And I think this is also something you were speaking, Maria, about, like, what do you share and not share on social media? I feel like as a therapist, this is not something I normally would talk about on a public forum, but I think it's valuable for the purposes of this podcast, which is that I don't know, if I am going to want to get pregnant at some point in my life. I'm getting married next year, and that's really exciting. And I'm in my early 30s, and I frankly haven't really ever had baby fever. I've never really had this sort of inner sense that I've heard others of my loved ones talk about, this sort of lifelong, like, desire to become a mother, become a parent, this sort of sense that this is something I'll deeply regret in my life if I don't pursue. This is something that's deeply meaningful or spiritual or just, like, crucially important to who I am. I have not felt that before. And I know that for me, I don't want to have children out of a fear of what if I don't. I want to have children if I feel in the present moment of my life that this is something I actively and enthusiastically want right now. So I think it'll be interesting for me, and hopefully for some of our listeners who might be in the same boat as me, to learn more about pregnancy and allow what I'm learning to kind of sit within me and shape, is this something that I could see myself opening up to at some future moment? Or is this something that I'm thinking, I want to support my loved ones on this journey, but it's not a journey for me besides as a loved one and support person? So I think that's kind of how I would summarize that.
Yeah. And I think that makes total sense. First of all, very intentional way about thinking about starting a family, right? Which in and of itself can be an important topic. Like, what does it mean to create another life and bring that life within your family unit? That's a whole topic in and of itself. But for people who may not be able to conceive, may not want to have a child, that doesn't mean that the information couldn't pertain to them. As you were just saying, Steph, how it might be helpful to understand what your loved ones are going through, or what a cousin is going through, what somebody that you,
or what your partner is going through,
right? Absolutely. So there are a lot of ways in which pregnancy can affect a life without being the pregnant person.
Definitely. Yeah.
I think if I had to sum up my relationship with pregnancy, it would be pretty simple, is that I'm currently, at least in the present moment, it's simple. I'm currently on the journey of getting pregnant, wanting that to be something that becomes real for me. I also, similar to you, Steph, have never had baby fever, which is interesting. I think that's also been a topic that I find, I don't think frustrating is the right word, but it's been interesting, I'd say, as I've gotten into my early 30s, and my family has, I have a big Italian family. So a lot of my cousins are around my age and have 1 or 2 or 3 children already. And I have chosen on purpose not to pursue adding a family member to my life at this point, up until this point. And so always being around babies and getting the question, oh, do you have baby fever now, Maria, has been interesting, because for me, I've never had that burning, like, now is the time where I need to be pregnant. I've never experienced that. I think I've always known, my true self has always known that being a mother is important to me. I'm very maternal. I've been very maternal since I'm very young. So I think that it was just something that I knew would naturally come about when the time was right. And I think that topic of timing is another topic we can get into for our viewers. Like, what is the right time? Is there even such a thing as the right time? My population of clients varies immensely in age and life stage. So understanding that, there isn't any judgment to when you decide to conceive. I digress there, I guess. So my relationship with pregnancy is at its early stages. I am in the process. My husband and I are in the process of looking forward to the day where we get a positive pregnancy test. So, I'm interested in understanding from your perspective, Steph, what your hope is for listeners of this podcast. What do you hope people might gain out of this?
Yeah, cool. I think the first thing that comes to mind is like learning and education, and also have fun. I'm hoping that as we learn more ourselves, because we're hoping to interview some experts, bring people on to talk about their stories. We're going to share stories with each other from our own professional experiences, obviously without, naming any specific like client details, but like our sort of professional views we'll share with each other. Like, hopefully we'll learn from each other, from our guests, from any source material that we read to prep for our episodes, and we'll get to take our listeners on that journey with us. So I'm thinking definitely education. I'm hoping it'll be fun for people to listen to. And I would say, as far as like even taking it a step further, what do I hope people will do with that learning? Like, I hope that if anyone is listening to this while they're pregnant or while they're at some stage of this journey, they feel less alone, like you talked about earlier with regard to some of the clients that you've worked with. I hope that people feel a sense of others can relate to what I'm going through. I hope they get a sense of validation and sort of, even though they might not know us personally, a feeling of support, that there are people out there who care and understand and want to know more and want people to feel supported, I also really, really hope that partners and loved ones of pregnant folks will take an interest in this and give it a listen, so that they learn more about what someone else is going through. I just think that having that information and that knowledge builds empathy, and we could always use more of that. So I think that kind of covers it. What about you? What do you hope people will get out of this?
Yeah, that's awesome. I really like what you highlighted. For me, I would say in a similar vein. I'll maybe explain it in a little bit differently. One of my friends is an OBGYN, and I was explaining this idea to her. And she's like, oh, there's a lot of podcasts out there regarding the pregnancy journey, motherhood, all of that kind of stuff. And she said she knows a lot of them because her patients come in and talk to her about them. And what she said was, it would be a breath of fresh air to have somebody who's just an everyday person who's going through this journey talking about it from a lens of wellness, right? From a lens of what to do to make you feel good through this journey, even if you're not always feeling so great because you have morning sickness or you're worried about if the baby's development's on track. What she was describing was, at least how I took it, was that there are a lot of podcasts or influencers out there who might talk about their pregnancy journey, and they may not be as relatable, or their pregnancy journey may not be achievable. It may not, there's no perfect pregnancy journey. There's no such thing, but we might perceive it that way as we're watching a celebrity go through it and all the glamour behind what it could look like for some people. But those might be the outliers. So I think what she was getting at, my friend, and what I would hope people get out of this podcast is a very connected, down to earth, grounded view of what goes on for somebody when they're pregnant, what goes on for the people surrounding them when they are pregnant, and really, really honing in on the mental health and emotional aspects of what goes on for people as they're going through this acute period of their life, because a lot changes that we can't see. And I mean, I think that's really really the case with mental health in general, right? But when you think about pregnancy, until a woman's belly pops, you really wouldn't know that she's pregnant. So that doesn't mean, though, that there aren't a million things that she's feeling inside of her that could be challenging. So really bringing those pieces to awareness for women who may feel like what they're going through isn't normal, and bringing that to some place of, this is okay. I'm okay. It may not feel great. It may feel uncomfortable, but this is something that's average. This is something that other people also experience. And I think that the last thing I'll say about what I hope people gain from listening is, I would say it's a little bit of, honoring maybe our aunts and moms and grandmas. When I think of my mother and my aunts and then people before them, their mothers, our grandparents' generation, they had this sense of village. They had this sense of community and camaraderie between women. And I think some of that's just the nature of how society was and how culture was at that point. And that obviously changes over time. But I do think that there's a part of that if we could bring that back into womanhood and motherhood and pregnancy, that it would make women feel just better in general. Having a village to lean on when something feels wrong, when something feels challenging or just uncomfortable, having people around you that you can lean on makes all the difference. I mean, that's what social support is. It's the remedy for a lot of our mental health struggles. So building something like that around this podcast would be a goal, I think, for me. And trying to bring back some of that village feeling, because I think that there's a lot of, magic in that for people.
Yeah, I love that. I hope for that too. That would be really cool.
Yeah.
I hope that, I think about other like communities that form around podcasts and like social media communities that kind of form, and some of the positive ways that those communities make people feel really supported and kind of held and seen. And yeah, that would be awesome if we could cultivate something like that through this experience. I think that'd be great.
Yeah, that would feel really good. It would feel like we're able to support so many more people than we would ever be able to really meet in real life, So it would be nice to feel like we could put out that positive energy into the universe.
And, I think too about like, I don't know if you ever have this experience as a clinician, but like, sometimes I have clients and I'm like, I wish I could introduce you to my other client, because I feel like you're going through something that's so similar, and you could really connect, but obviously you can't do that because of confidentiality. And so if this is a format where we can bring people together, I think that'd be really cool.
Yes, I definitely have that experience quite a bit.
Yeah.
Quite a bit. So this could be the space for something like that to happen. So,
yeah. So on that note, would you want to talk a little bit about some of the topics or themes or ideas that we would like to maybe, or that you would like to hope that we can cover in this podcast?
Yeah, I think, to be honest about it, I'm pretty open to a lot of suggestion, to people's interests as we move through this. There's not currently, at least in my mind, a set agenda for this podcast. I want to leave room for the unknown. I don't know what I'll feel like when I'm pregnant. I don't know what, God willing, the pregnancy is healthy, but I don't know what it's going to be like, so leaving room and space to receive whatever is gonna come our way, and then maybe bring that up in conversation. So part of it is open and free form, I think. But if I had to think of some specific topics, I think it would definitely be, developmental periods of baby related to what the mother might experience. So what's going on internally that you might not be able to see unless you have an ultrasound, but you might not be able to see, but something's different, right? So what is that different feeling? What's going on for you in there? Because if we can just highlight it, then fear dissipates. And once fear dissipates, you can enjoy maybe a little bit more connecting to the experience. I'd like to talk about that. I'd like to talk about trauma related to pregnancy. I definitely have a handful of clients who unfortunately have sexual trauma history or just in general abuse histories that have created a disconnect from their own bodies. And so to ask them to be mindful and present with a pregnancy is like almost an impossibility at first, right? So talking about that, because there's a lot there. And I think that ties really well into sexual trauma and sex therapy and how people relate to how, if you're uncomfortable with your body and your sexuality, you might have trouble conceiving because sex in general might not be a safe place for you, right?
Absolutely true. Yeah.
So I'd like to bring that in. I'd like to bring in some topics from experts out there. And I think that goes into like who we'd like to bring on, because I'm not an expert in this. I definitely have a specialization and I have a high level of interest in it. But there are so many experts out there that could really, I think, bring some benefit to our conversations, such as nutritionists, OBGYNs, pelvic floor therapists, doulas, people who are specialize in mindful birthing classes. What does a birth center look like? I didn't even know that existed until more recently in my life, right? So talking about like maybe the medical model of birth and pregnancy, and then maybe a more holistic model of birth and pregnancy. So those are some of the ideas that come up for me when you ask me that question. What about for you, Steph?
Same. First of all, I think everything that you named is something I would be interested in talking about. I was thinking about this question in prep for this episode, and I was thinking that the topics we might cover, there are some that are like directly pertaining to pregnancy, things like what's going on with the baby's development, how is the person carrying the pregnancy's body changing during this time, what's going on in each trimester, what's quote unquote normal, what kinds of medical and support professionals are out there to help a person through this journey, all those kinds of things that are like about the pregnancy. And then there's a whole nother category of topics, I think, that's like the intersection between pregnancy and something. So what you said, pregnancy and a person with a trauma history, how might those two things intersect, and what might that experience be like for the person? I'm also really interested in the intersection between pregnancy and like body image, people who maybe have a history of eating disorders or things like that. Like, how does the process of not even necessarily diagnosed eating disorders, even just people who've
just disordered eating or disordered
struggles with their image of their body. Or I mean, people in larger bodies who have experienced medical discrimination, what does that look like during pregnancy? I mean, I think that the idea of body image, eating, and body size, like all of that stuff as it connects with pregnancy, that's something I have an interest in. Diet culture and pregnancy, maybe thinking about
Absolutely.
that way. I'm interested, as you can imagine, in like sex and pregnancy, both how does sex change for a couple when that couple is trying to conceive?
Yeah.
And similarly, how might sex change for a couple if a partner is pregnant? What does that look like? I think that'll be a really interesting topic, maybe to talk to some guests about too, like if they're willing to share, because I think that we have all kinds of ideas about pregnancy and motherhood that like socioculturally we might not think of as like erotic. A lot of times when people are pregnant, desire skyrockets because of all of the hormonal changes that are going on. And so what could that look like in a couple's relationship? I think that's a really cool topic. I mean, I could go on and on. I don't want to take too much time, and I want to leave some stuff for people to figure out as we go, and also for us to figure out as we go, as you said, being open to what happens, what comes up. But I'm interested to learn this, to summarize the stuff that's like both directly about pregnancy, but then also like how does pregnancy intersect with other kinds of life experiences, and what might that mean for the pregnant person and for their loved ones in terms of what it might be like for that person, what it might be like to support that person, etc.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's where my interest ultimately is, it kind of goes to as well. And I think that kind of ties in the name of our podcast, Life Psych, right? What happens throughout life and how does that intersect with psychology and our experience of being with ourselves, with each other, with a baby, with anything that goes on in this life. So intersecting those topics is, of great interest to me. So I agree completely with you. Yeah. So I'm looking forward to it. It's very natural for me to converse with you. I feel obviously very blessed to have you in my life as a cousin. So thank you for joining me on this journey. And I look forward to anybody else who joins us on this journey as well. Just, making themselves known in whatever way possible through social media. I don't really have any more to say about that. I'm really excited.
Me too. And I want to say thank you to you too for approaching me with this idea. I think it's going to be really fun. I think we're going to learn a lot. I know I'm going to learn a lot. There's so much that I don't know about this that I'm really excited to talk to people about. I hope we'll have a balance of like our experiences, expert experiences. And I'd love to bring on like just some friends and like people who
absolutely
are or have been pregnant to just talk about like, hey, for you, what's going on? What are you dealing with? Let's hear about it. So I think we're going to have a lot of really cool conversations, and I'm excited too.
Yeah, it's going to be great.
As we're wrapping up, I just want to give a quick shout out to the title of the show.
Yes.
Life Psych. Yeah, it's good. I'm still a big fan of Life Cycle.
Me too.
Our market research, if you will, asking friends and family, revealed people would not understand if we spelled out cycle PSYCHLE. But
I think our viewers would have gotten it, but I didn't want to take the chance.
They would have had to hear it out loud first, and we couldn't take that risk. But,
yeah, I think one day we're going to have to do a blooper reel of all of the all of the titles for the podcast. I was with your brother the other night, Steph, and I mentioned to him that we were going to be doing this week. And he's like, oh, what's the name? And I explained it's Life Psych Baby Bump Edition for this particular season, if you will, of this podcast. And my husband, Anthony, was sitting next to me, and I was like, yeah, he watched us kind of do our trial run. And your brother asked my husband, so, how was it? How'd they do? And Anthony was like, well, they spent about 4 out of the 5 hours researching and coming up with names, and they used none of them. So it's like, yeah, that's pretty accurate.
Yeah. Well, on that note, I think that's a wrap.
Yeah, I think it's
that right there tells people quite a bit of what they need to know about us and what this process is going to be like.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we will be back at some point in the near future. So stay tuned, and have a great day. Be well.
Awesome. Bye, Maria.
Bye.